Good morning, can you hear me at the back? Good. We'll just wait for these people to just sit down. Did everybody enjoy the day off the boat yesterday in Nassau? Yeah. It was good, wasn't it? Good to get your feet on terra firma. Right. Good morning. I'm Robert Brown. We should know that after 7 presentation. Sorry. So, this isn't the last one in the series of the 7. Forensics is quite a job. Before we get into the lecture, I just got to cover off a few points. This guy we talk about at Marconi, and a gentleman asked me if he didn't invent the radio, who did? And at the time, my brain were a bit scrambled and I couldn't remember. But these guys on the left all worked in electromagnetic radiation research. So they got the ideas of transferring the information by electromagnetic radiation. But it was this guy, Marconi, who developed the first apparatus for long-distance radio transmission. So I was partly right, partly wrong. I stand corrected. We also talked about this, frequency and amplitude modulation. And I tried to explain it the best way I could with my hands flapping and things like that. But this is amplitude modulation. We're looking at our heart monitor again. So this is amplitude modulation and this is frequency modulation. But the important thing is this thing, a carrier. So when you tune your radio, let's say to just an arbitrary figure, 60 kilohertz, it's that 60 kilohertz carrier that you're tuning it to. I'm talking to you now, obviously in a microphone, but my voice is varying the air, the pressure waves, and this is changing it into an electronic signal. The frequency range of my voice is probably from 100 Hz to 20 kilohertz. As you get older, your frequency response comes down. Dogs is a lot higher, that's why I have these whistles that we can't hear. So this thing is the modulator signal, my voice. And we mix these two together. And as you can see in amplitude modulation, that's the sum of them. And in frequency modulation, it's the compression and expansion of frequency. And it looks like this in real time. So that's the signal, amplitude modulation. You can see the peaks and troughs align. And here, at the peaks they're compressed and at the troughs they're expanded. So we're modulating the signal. Amplitude modulation, frequency modulation. We also spoke about JFK's assassination and this particular theory that's come from a guy called a ballistics expert, Howard Donahue. He's all put into this book, this Smoking Gun by Colin McLaren, and he uses a lot of the information that's come from this book, Mortal Error by Bona Beringer. There is a film, a documentary on Amazon Prime of this. And if you're so inclined, this is Howard Donahue, the ballistics expert. He's got a Picano rifle and this A7 automatic rifle. And finally, if you're inclined, if you're in a pub or a bar, you've got nothing to do, then you can download the Warren Report, all 900 odd pages on it, and read it. So that's that. The gentleman also asked me about, he said, I didn't really understand this particular slide. So I thought I'd just explain it again for him because it leads into what I'm going to talk talk about in one of the cases. So he didn't really understand the transformer. So in the last lecture, we agreed that this is a magnet, north and south, and this magnet has a magnetic field which leaves a north pole and enters a south pole. Yep. So if we grab this magnet and we physically moved it towards a coil of copper wire, and this copper wire was connected to a little instrument, this magnetic field would envelop this copper wire. I imagine a magnetic field like a cloud. That cloud would pass over this copper coil, and we'd see this meter flick. So we expanded that a little bit, and we drilled a hole in our magnet. We started to rotate it. Sorry, the other way. So we've got a rotating magnetic field, and because this magnetic field's enveloping or cutting this coil, this meter develops this output or measures this voltage waveform, and this we refer to as a sine wave. So we then went on to this, and I've just embellished this diagram a little bit further. So this is a transformer, and we have a coil of wire, and we have this, and we apply this sine wave to it. So what that coil is doing is generating a magnetic field which is moving that way and that way. So it's going like this. And when that magnetic field envelops that coil, the laws of magnetic induction, Faraday laws, says that an electrical current will be induced in that, and it will light that light bulb. So the voltage waveform across there is shaped like that, exactly the same as that. Now the thing is with transformers, if the number of turns on this side, which they refer to as a primary, is the same as the number of turns on that secondary, the two voltages will be equal. But what we can do on the secondary, we can have as many turns as we want, or as few as we want. So if we put, let's say the ratio's 1 to 5, and you put 10 volts in there, we get 50 volts out of there. And if we had 10 turns on there, and we had, I've got to get my maths right here before I'm going to say that. If we had 1,000 on there, we'd get 10,000 volts. Yeah? The current would be low, but we'd get 10,000 volts. And you can do it the other way, in less. If you've got 10 there and 5 there, 10 volts, divided by 5, it's called a transformer ratio. Yeah?
That's how they reduce, like you see these like doorbells and stuff, and that's how they reduce the voltage to the doorbell?
Could be if it's an AC system, but I think on a doorbell it might be a DC system. We'll talk about this up in the smoking shed. Agreed? So, this thing here, it's a black square, it's a video. But I made this and we'll just watch it. To do it again. No, it stopped. What this is, I bought this on the internet. And you supply this with 6 volts, and we're getting 400,000 volts out of there. Low current, but it's enough to make the air ionize, and we get this arc and spark going across. Gives you quite a whack when you get over it, to the amusement of my 2 sons when I did. But this is the basis of a taser or a stun gun. Which brings me to this first case. What I thought I'd do today, I'd go through 3 cases which are they're unusual in the general terms of forensic science and electrical forensics. This was a case, Rex versus Marnie Miller, and this is a homemade stun gun. So Miller was a drug dealer, a racketeer and not contortionist. You know what I mean, don't you? He used this to leverage money out and drugs out of people and things like that. Now in the UK, the stun gun is an offensive weapon. You're not allowed to own one. And you have to have a license to actually touch one of these things. So he was found in possession of this stun gun. And the prosecution, under section 5.1b of the Firearms Act, said this is a lethal weapon, you're in possession of this stun gun, maximum sentence is 10 years in jail. And then I've seen documentaries about it, I've seen young lads who've bought these stun guns off of the internet, come from China, offensive weapon, prison sentence. So, this is the actual extract from the Firearms Act. You can read it for yourself, but the important wording is this: noxious liquid gas or other thing. And noxious, in this sense, means harmful, poisonous, or very unpleasant. Electricity hurts. The defence for Mr. Miller argued that under the Prevention of Crime Act 1953, Section 1, it was just an offensive weapon. So, if it is an offensive weapon, it still gets a fine or a small prison sentence. So they were arguing between themselves whether it was stun gun or an offensive weapon. And the key thing to differentiate between the two is its effect and whether it could incapacitate somebody to the point where if he pushed it on somebody, the person would fall to the ground incapacitated. That would be a stun gun. If he pushed it on somebody and they didn't, that would be an offensive weapon. But how do you actually define if it's one or the other? Nearly right, Kelvin, electrical current. So, if we come back to this, we introduced this in a previous lecture, and we're interested in this little fella. This is Mr. Current I, and Mr. Current causes muscular problems in your body when it's injected through an electrical shock. So to actually test this stun gun, or alleged stun gun, I had to develop a way to do it, so that's why I built that spark machine, so I could test the test equipment on it. So basically what I had to do was look at the body resistance of a human being. This little diagram maps out, different aspects of body resistance. Like between your ears, it's quite low. Why? Because your brain's a lot of salt. Hand to foot, still quite low. A bigger path, I think, more resistance. Dry skin is, because it's dry and there's not much salt in saline solution, its electrical resistance is higher, whereas wet skin is lower. So to test this device, I basically got an electronic component called an electrical resistor to simulate the human body. And I went down to the Metropolitan Police research laboratories in London where this device was being held. And I got all my test equipment, and there was a police officer there, and I'm not allowed to touch this thing. This is what you're going to do. I said, well, I'm going to put my test equipment on those two probes there, and when I tell you to push that button, I want you to do it. So this guy was looking at me, thinking, I'm out stunning here. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm positive. Look, I know what I'm doing. When I tell you, push that button. Without the test equipment on, when you pushed it, it went, and a big spark flashed across it. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. So anyway, I put my test equipment on, he pushed the button, we took a reading of electrical current, which this would impart if it was pushed on to some poor guy who was leveraging drugs off or something like that. So I introduced this slide earlier on, and this is the physiological effects of electrical shock. And we were looking, these are the zones, we've got this electrical current up here and the time. And according to these physiological effects, we were looking at this phrase here, immobilization may occur. So this corresponds to AC3 curve B and above. So we're looking on this side. So if we drop down, we get 200 milliamps. So I just produced a report that said, if it's greater than 200 milliamps, it's a stun gun. And if it's less than 200 milliamps, it can be considered as an offensive weapon. And that's what they had to work against. Interesting case, that. The next one, which I found interesting, centred on this place. Now this is His Majesty's prison, Wakefield. And Wakefield's a city in the north of England, close to Leeds. When you go on the train to Leeds, it passes through Wakefield station, and you pass this place. And it's got like a Shawshank aura to it. There's like a black cloud above it, and you whoop, Wakefield prison. It's a category A male prison. Holds some of the most notorious criminals in the United Kingdom. It's a Victorian building, old. Oops. From the top, it's split into 4 wings, and you enter here. So we've got an outer wall, and then on the inside there's a razor wired fence that goes all the way around. Yeah. So the gatehouse is up in this top corner, and you go through all these security checks and things like that. Prior to going in here, I was asked to produce a list of tools, electrical tools, that I wanted to take in with me. So I did a crosshead screwdriver, or a flathead screwdriver, a pair of pliers. And there was a reason for that, which I'll come to in a minute. But so we entered through security, fingerprints and everything. And then you enter through the gate here. And I did notice that all the way around here, between the razor wire and the fence, the police and dogs and things like that. And going from the top of the building in like a mesh type affair with steel wires with whistling balls on, like balls. And when I went in, I was assigned, I had a police guard with me. Then we had a lady photographer. I wasn't allowed to take photographs. Only the photographer was, and I had to dictate, will you take me a photograph of that? Will you take me a photograph of that? There were 2 solicitors, because I was instructed as a joint expert. So if you can remember, I'm acting for the court, not either side, I'm not partisan. oops, we went into this area. I saw these wires above. And I said to the prison guard, are these for drones? And he goes, well, yes, but we have had real helicopters try to land in here to get people out. So, it's a difficult place to work in. But we enter this door here, and then when you go in, it's a bit like Alcatraz, there's this like warders communal area, and you can see down these wings. And when you look down them, it's very Victorian, there's the cells and whatever, there's different floors. The notorious prisoners in there, this guy's called Charles Bronson, changed his name by people. Why it's Charles Bronson, I don't know. But he calls himself that now. And I have a friend who used to be like a prisoner counsellor. He said these guys, it's just like a hierarchical system in prisoners. Is they'll do things to push themselves to the top. This was one of these guys who used to fight and all sorts. Got a notorious reputation. There he is. I think he looks a bit like Ozzy Osbourne. And it's a bit like this King of Thieves thing. He's that notorious that made it into a film. Bronson, Tom Hardy. I've not watched it, but I suppose it might be good, I don't know. But anyway, it all boiled down to, that's quite an apt word, that it all boiled down to this. This thing is an electric kettle. Every household in the UK has an electrical kettle. I don't mind the yes. Do you have stove tops or do you have electrical one? Electric. Sorry? Yeah. In the UK, us Brits are synonymous with fish and chips, but also as big tea drinkers. In fact, there's two ladies, there's one there, every morning, oh, I've got to have a good cup of tea. Or the other phrase is, put the kettle on, referring to this. Well, there were two convicts in Wakefield prison. They must have to get heads together and talked about this. One was Mr. Ali Khurram Abbas, and the other one was Mr. Simon Richards. This gentleman was a double murderer, and this gentleman, Mr. Richards, tried to smuggle £35 million worth of pure cocaine in barrels of molasses from Rotterdam into the UK. This guy had been exported at the time I went into prison. Deported, sorry, but you know what I mean. And this guy was still there. And he escorted me and the two solicitors and the prison guard and the photographer into his cell. I remember standing right at the entrance to the corridor, and the officer says, "Oh, here's Simon coming now." This guy ambles up with a green sweatshirt on and pants and runners and things like that. Very pleasant, very polite. "Oh, good morning, Dr. Brown," that type of thing. "Will you come with me? I'm in number 27 down here," so we walked down this corridor. And we come to this door where we went in. It's his prison cell, bed, and a computer in there, television. But Mr. Abbas claimed that the fact that he wasn't allowed an electric kettle in his cell was a breach of his human rights. He was a Muslim, and during Ramadan, he thought that he should be allowed to have an electric kettle, so he should boil water in his cell. This is irrespective of the fact that he was allowed to have a stainless steel thermos flask in there with water in, which he was allowed to fill before lockdown at 6 o'clock. He wanted an electric kettle. So they must have been talking about this, and Mr. Price, equally, I think he got a slight disability. They decided that he was going to claim against the Equality Act that he should be allowed an electric kettle. So my part in this came, I had to go into the prison and determine whether the electrical system of the cell could support the use of electrical kettle, because the Ministry of Justice said it couldn't. In a power sense or in a current sense, it wouldn't support it. So we went in and we looked at the electrical system, and 6 cells all operate on the same system. So we've got to understand that if 6 guys in their cells at a prearranged time decided to switch the kettles on, there would be a big power surge. Right? And it was connected to a consumer unit, so the daisy chain like this. Yeah? So, from our previous conversations, we understand that a 2,000 watt kettle, 2 kilowatt, at a UK voltage will draw 8.7 amps. So if you multiply that by 6, call it 8, 6, 8, 48 amps, and in the consumer unit we had a 20 amp miniature circuit breaker. These guys could cause havoc by switching the kettles on all at once. So it was disallowed. They didn't like it, in particular Mr. Price, who wrote a 4-page report telling me that everything I'd done wrong and everything that should be done in his way. This guy's in there for 25 years, he's got time on his hands, he's got nothing else to do. So he just wrote this quite intellectual guy, quite informative, but that was the decision. No, you can't have a kettle because the electrical system won't sustain the power. The final case I'm going to describe is this one, Regina versus Perkins. And this took place at this place, the Old Baily Central Criminal Court, a Crown Court. It's very famous. It's just off a street on the Strand. It's very imposing, looks down on you. It's topped by this Lady of Justice figurine, statue that I introduced. She stands up there. And it's built on the former site of Newgate Prison, which was shut down in the early 19th century. Inside, it's a beautiful building, all marble hallways and things. You can go inside and you can go into this area. But this is the old part of the court. This was built in 1905. The Old Baily, or the Criminal Court in London, has been in existence since 1585 in its different forms. So this building was built around 1907, I think. Former buildings, I think this is a painted in 1808. So you can see it's a popular court that this poor guy's being tried by these judges. This is the most famous court. I'll just go back. There's 4 courts in this building. 1, 2, there's one on this side, and one up there. This one here is number 1 court. Very famous court. And this is the inside. And we're actually looking as though we're sat in the dock. So here, this little thing here are actually steps coming up from the cells below. Come around here, you sit in the dock. The judge, there's only one judge who sits here, so I don't know why they've got all these other ones. The jury's on the left-hand side. Public gallery up here. Press box along here. Barristers at the bar to discuss the case. There's been many famous cases in here. We talked about this guy, Holy Harley Crippen, in one of the earlier presentations. Oscar Wilde was tried there. I don't know what for, but this guy, Reginald Halliday Christie, his murder's a serial killer. 10 Rillington Place, the film, if you want to watch it. Richard Attenborough plays this guy. Very sinister film. This guy, is it Edward Joyce? Lord Haw-Haw. Sorry? Lord Haw-Haw, yeah. Second World War, Germany calling that thing. This lady, Ruth Ellis, last person to be hanged in the United Kingdom, tried in #1 court. And final person, this guy, Peter Sutcliffe, we refer to him as the Yorkshire Ripper, another serial killer. So it's a very, very high profile court in London. Seems to attract all the top trials. So, to the case. Rex versus Perkins. Mr. Perkins was the manager and director of an electronic firm. And he bought via the internet some small electronic devices. And he imported them into the UK and then exported them to China and Taiwan. And these electronic devices, which we'll get to in a minute, were very sensitive in a customs sense. And the customs and excise people latched onto this, understood it. And because they were sentenced, this guy Perkins was then charged with 26 counts of fraud for saying that he didn't know what he was doing or he didn't know what they were. In other words, he lied. And 26 counts of license evasion. Should have had licenses, but he didn't. So it's a quite serious offence. So he's looking at a 14, 15, 16-year prison sentence. I remember talking to him, we stood outside court. I said, "Chris, did you know what you were doing?" "No." He says, "Somebody just asked me if we could get these things, and I purchased them on the internet and sent them off." And he did sound really innocent, but anyway. So these things were monolithic microwave integrated circuits. So basically, they're a thing we'd call an amplifier. And the size of them is small. They're basically surface mount components. So if you think of a printed circuit board that you see in electronic devices, this thing would be put on by a machine. It's very small. So, these particular devices, because they were sensitive in an electronic sense, are governed by what we refer to as an import or export control. The key word being control, which is a document that's set out by His Majesty's Excise and Customs that sets out the parameters for an amplifier that says, yes, you do need this control, or no, you don't. And this is an extract from that control. I don't want you to read it all because respectfully it's complicated. But I've highlighted these three words: average output power. And what that's actually saying is this particular amplifier within this control should have an average output power of certain parameters greater than 4 watts or greater than 1 watts. Yeah? Now the thing about an amplifier, I'm utilising an amplifier now as I speak to you, because I'm speaking into a microphone which is converting my voice, pressure waves, sound waves, into an electronic signal, and then it's sending it back to an amplifier. Those signals are pretty small. the amplifier increases those signals, it amplifies them, makes them get bigger, and then they're outputted to speakers, which you can hear me talking to you now. So this particular amplifier that I'm using now, referred to as an audio amplifier, because my frequencies are audible frequencies. These particular amplifiers are working up in the frequency range of gigahertz. That's a gigahertz is 1,000 million hertz. That's right, isn't it? My friend down here, yeah. 1,000 million. 1 megahertz is a million. A gigahertz is 1,000 million. So we're talking really, really high frequency. And the reason why this control was set up as it is because these devices were used in or could be used in guided weapon systems and radar. So you could obviously see why HMRC were thinking, oh, we can't expose these to China and Taiwan. But he did. But I was working for Mr. Perkins, and I was working with a lady barrister called Siobhan Gray, a really intelligent top criminal barrister at that time. She now progressed to becoming a KC, taken silk as they refer it to. I don't get this silk thing, but that's just a barrister's term. She's become a KC. And she was very ambitious, and she wanted to understand the term average output power. I want to know everything about it, you know. So I met her in Sheffield, which is up north of the UK, close to where I lived. And we went into a meeting room in the hotel, and I spent a day with her, with an array of electronic equipment, and trying to explain what average output means. Actually, what it does mean is that average output power is, well, the power of an amplifier is dynamic. And I'll demonstrate this to you as I did in code. I'm speaking into this now, which is going into an amplifier. And as I speak more loudly, the amplifier gets louder. And if I speak softly. So what I'm doing through my voice is I'm varying the output power. So it's a dynamic quantity. And it can't be governed by these parameters greater than 1 watt or greater than 4 watts. So what Miss Gray tried to argue in court is this particular control was ambiguous. Now, we went into the Old Baily, and we went into a court hearing before we went into trial, because the judge was concerned that the complexity of this case would be, respectfully, too difficult for a jury to come to an agreement or to agree on whether they're guilty or not guilty or what. And so they had a guy from HMRC who understood about this control, and I had to go in the dock and explain to the judge of my interpretation. And he decided, on the basis of our explanations, that this could be heard by a jury. So it went to trial, and it was found that the people using this had to look outside of these particular parameters and look at the potential of the amplifiers to fall into this category. To me, it was a very loose result. Either it fits or it doesn't fit. It's got the potential to. So I didn't agree with that one. But that was a really interesting case, not only for the complexity, but for where it was held. So, we're coming to the close of this talk now, and I have to say, it's been a real pleasure to present these talks. Over the course of the 7 talks, talks, we've talked about the fascinating world of forensic science, the scope of it, different aspects of each, some examples of forensic science. We went into the history of forensic science, and we discussed Abraham Lincoln's almanac case. I presented what I do as a forensic electrical engineer, and I would present evidence of court. We've had a look at theft of intellectual property. We've looked at our friend Basil. Looked at an intellectual property dispute with the oil paraffin wax inhibitor, and we've come today to talk about a few interesting cases. So, respectfully, it is quite a job in its variance and its complexity. So, at this point, are there any questions from anybody? Go on here.
What is a summary judgment? I've never heard of it unless you're sentenced.
Say again, sorry.
You had two kinds of judgments. One was the one that I'm used to, and there was a second that I never heard of, called a summary judgment, in which the punishment was less. Can you explain that?
Would that be on? Would that be in the act?
Yes.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Move back. Is it on here?
Yeah.
Well, this is the actual extract from this Crime Act 1953, and I'm just looking for the word summary. Oh, there, yeah. On summary conviction to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months or a fine. Well, to be quite truthful and honestly, I don't know. Because I'm an electrical engineer, I'm not a legal expert. But if you allow me, sir, I'll go away and I'll find out for you.
Would you?
And I'll put it on the website.
My other question is on amplitude and frequency.
Yes.
FM is frequency and therefore sends out more information. Therefore, the signal that you receive is much more quality. Original AM had a higher amplitude, and at the edge of the amplitude were magnetic energy that caused it to be a less quality signal with breaking up and everything. Now, if that's changed with new AM, is it because they lowered the height of the amplitudes?
I don't think it's because they've lowered the height of the amplitude. I think it's the fact that filters, electronic filters, become more efficient now. Old FM used to be susceptible to electromagnetic interference. If you can remember, if you had an old car radio and you'd not got a conventional recoil capacitor, and you turn the engine on, we get a big lot of interference. That's AM interference. We've got filters now that can cancel that. In fact, on the way here, I bought myself a pair of noise cancelling headphones. How do they work? They actually monitor audio and then put a second signal in antiphase to that. It cancels each other out. Think about that, because it has to do it in the latency from detecting the signal to actually outputting to your ear. It has to be mine, you. Any more questions? Oh, thank you, yes.
Did he get nailed?
No. Yeah, that's the crux of all that point. I think that guy, because there was this ambiguity in this control, the judge decided that he was guilty, but he got a suspected sentence, so he didn't go to prison. So he was convicted on one sentence, but let off in another.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Insurance cases that you're involved in, what percentage are fraudulent?
What percentage are fraudulent and credible in insurance cases? Of the ones I've done, it's about 50-50, I would say. But obviously there's a lot more cases than what I've done. But the thing that gets me about insurance cases is that you've got a loss adjuster sat at the side of you, and they're wanting to know how much they've got to pay out. And you're saying things to them, well, it looks as though it's our fault, this one, or looks that type of thing. An interesting case I did with insurance is that in South Wales there's a big oxygen production company, produces oxygen for the nearby Port Talbot Steelworks. So on this particular day, they got an electrical high voltage substation which was connected via a high voltage cable to a secondary substation. And on this day of the incident, the guy in charge of the substation switched in a circuit breaker. That's like a big light switch. But we were talking about switching in a circuit breaker of 11,000 volts. And they've been doing maintenance on this cable, and so at one end they tied it physically to earth, physically and electrically to earth. And he forgot to take this earth off. So when he threw the switch, there was a massive big explosion. And if you can imagine this substation was in like a concrete bunker, the roof went off, everything had gone. Has massive consequences then, because British Steel Corporation can't produce because they've got no oxygen. British Oxygen can't produce because they've got no electricity. And there were 5 parties involved in this, and we were trying to determine we knew what the causation was. The guy put the switching down to earth. But on the back of that, there should have been protection systems that stopped the explosion occurring. There should have been big fuses elsewhere in the system or circuit breakers which would stop it. And they didn't. For some reason, it exploded. So we had to look at all these different facets, these protection systems, which included different insurance companies, because their parties, they were involved with the parties. So this claim was millions and millions. The incident was in 2018. And just before I came in, I went to a meeting in London of mediation, where we're all sat down trying to decide who's going to pay what. And the way this works is, one company is in one room, another company in another, so there's these 5 rooms, and they have this mediator, barrister, a KC, goes into room 1. Well, do you think it was your fault? Well, no, but we're going to pay £1 million, goes into the next room. They're going to pay £1 million, well, that's no. So he's flitting between all these rooms, and then we all meet together, and then we have lunch, and then we start off again, and it gets to the end of the day. Well, my final offer is £4 million, this type of thing. No, we're not accepting that. All right, we'll go to court. Thank you very much. Back on the train home. That's where we got to. So this is 2018 to 2025 now. So I've been told it probably won't go to court, because in the interim, now we've been to this mediation, everybody knows what they've got in the pocket to pay for it. So I've been told it'll probably not go to court until we settle down. You can imagine that. We've been at this nearly 7 years now. It's incredible. And I don't think there's any fraud involved. It's just long-winded. So, are there any more questions? Yes, sir.
You've spoken a few times about how when you go to court, it's a bit like a chess game.
Oh yeah. Sorry, right, yeah.
I'm just wondering, as a professional witness who does it a lot, do you have strategies that you use to try and avoid answering a question you wish they didn't ask?
Could you repeat the question? No, I understand what you're saying, and it's really a tense time when you're sat in the lobby and you know you're going to be called or sometimes I sit in court, I can actually see the barristers. And the thing is that when you watch a barrister in action, you know if he's good or if they're good or if they're not good. And I work under one barrister, and when you watch him perform, he's very polite, but he poses his questions in a structured way. Can I put it to you that this may happen? So, yes. Now, you just said yes, so let's take that a step further. In this particular document, and he builds his argument very structured, and then at the very end, that's where the scorpion sting comes in. And he goes, well, you've just said this, and you've just said this, and you've just said this, so it must be this. Do you agree? It has to be. And I think, yes, Philip, you've got him. But to answer your point, when I go in on the stand, I have to psych myself up, and I think to myself, well, Robert, you know a lot more about electrical engineering than that guy that's in that box. So think about that. He's going to be asking you. But you've got to be very careful and really understand what they're asking you, because they're trained professionals and they'll lead you down the pathway to give them the answer that you want. So, does that answer your question? Sort of. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have a drink. But yeah, I mean, I'll come to you in a minute. You do have to prepare yourself well. I mean, you have to read your reports, you have to read what say I'm working for prosecution, what the defence are going to throw at you. So you have to prepare well. If you don't prepare well, you're going to be cut to pieces. Any more questions?
Just one, on your website, do you go into greater depth in what your lecture was here? And when's the next time you're going to be giving it?
Right. To answer your question, Kelvin, and thank you for asking it, because all these PowerPoint presentations and videos of the lectures will be on the website from next week. I'll try to embellish the PowerPoint presentations a bit more with things that I've spoke about. But to answer your final question, when will I be doing it? I don't know. Just depends if NCL want to commission me again, I don't know. But I must say, I just will through to the end. We got to questions. It's been a complete pleasure. This is the first time I've lectured on a cruise. I've lectured before. And I have to admit, 2 weeks ago when I first stood on here, I was quite nervous, but we've got to know each other quite well, what we do. So this is the last lecture. I don't know if I'll see you again, but I'd like to thank you for being a wonderful audience. It's been a great pleasure. I'll leave you with these two guys. And I like this quote from Isaac Newton. If I have seen further, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. I mean, all what I've been doing with you today is talking about things that people have taught me, which I'm very grateful about. And this second one, if you can't explain, it's simply you don't understand it well enough. Einstein. And he's right. If you can't explain it, then go away. But it's been a complete pleasure. Thank you very much. And have a safe journey home. I need an haircut. Thank you.